We're moving on now to the next segment of the presentation regarding Sports Alliance's community and foundation initiative. In terms of context for what we're looking at here, and again, it goes back to where I started all of this in saying we have to do those things right now, which we are indeed able to do. If we look at what we began as a company doing 18 long years ago, we were transforming slightly amorphous club concepts about what supporter relations could mean into robust and measurable strategies, workflows, products, tools that you could use. As we've looked around, for the external world, a club and the foundation, though the foundation may well be a completely distinct legal entity, a separate charity, whatever it may be, it is all one thing. It is all one organization, finally. The audiences are significant. The audiences are the audiences of the future. The need for technical solutions in the community sector is perhaps even more dramatic than what we've seen on the commercial side of sport, and has remained, for the most part, completely unaddressed. The skills, the empathy that's required to help motivate and care for people of ages and capabilities of all kinds in the real world doing things don't necessarily always correlate with technical systems development. Cash is always tight, and there's no simple commercial ROI model in providing assistance to people as opposed to generating revenue. So we had to take a slightly different approach to what we were going to do. Our concept behind this is that it is not a commercial enterprise, which we can put here. There is no commercial approach to this. So Sports Alliance will be donating its software base to a UK community interest company as an initial asset and endowment, and thus be able to provide services to foundations. Because again, every one of the clubs that we're associated with has a foundation. This is a way for us as a company to move everything that we do through to the bottom level of that pyramid which I described. We will deploy what we need to deploy. We will build something that can serve existing foundations as we learn more and as we interact with all of you. Some of our first foundations that we're talking with are actually on the call today. And then we will move on from there to being able to seek alternate sources of funding as a separate organization will be entitled to. It is a not-for-profit now, addressing a not-for-profit situation. When we think about our approach, it's not entirely dissimilar to what we have to do in our regular world of commercial operations. Everything that we do with our commercial solution to suit supporters applies to the world of community with distinct differences. The data management is a bit different. There's a higher level of security that we have to look at. There are different types of targets that we deal with in terms of physical and engagement of activity as opposed to just pounds. Business intelligence is different. We're looking at deprivation levels. We have to change the data science approach. And there's this huge power of being able to share models across community organizations and where we are going with them. Digital marketing is kind of the same, but the impact for sponsors is a slightly different one in getting them involved on a more coherent basis, especially when you talk about sponsors later. All makes sense. It all hangs together. Strategically, this is a critical, natural move for Sports Alliance. Emotionally, for me, it's an exceptionally important one. When I began this whole enterprise, it is now decades ago, it was on the logic of a relatively simple one, perhaps for a New Yorker. If I can keep one black kid through the power and aspiration that a club represents from picking up a knife, we will have done something that is more important than just increasing revenue and driving businesses forward. This is an important part of who we are and what we are. I'm going to ask at that point Johnny to come in and start to take you through a detailed description of the product, and ask Rob Weber from BSF, from the Bristol Sport Foundation, who's kind of been our charter client in developing these capabilities over the last couple of years, to share some words with us as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthony. Hello, everyone. So our approach to begin with was to try and look at what we do for the sports clubs and how it differentiates into a community setting. So what we have at the moment in the orange at the top is the centralized customer data platform, the data warehouse. A lot of it is transferable, but there needs to be some bespoke edits that we need to make it applicable to a foundation. The marketing that we have is applicable across all fields. The filter builder is, aside from a few tweaks for some of the bespoke content that the foundations need, almost identical. The tracking and analysis is something new that we hadn't had to do before, looking at physical scores or looking at where participants began and ended the programs that the various foundations are running. And donor management, I suppose, approached in a similar way to some commercial or hospitality clients, in that they're almost segmented away to begin with from the general population of the database and treated a bit more sensitively. Going forward, what we need to improve on and need to build in terms of the analytics, there's more, again, bespoke information that the foundations want to see and want to hold. With that, the benchmarking that moves on from there to see, again, as I mentioned before, where participants are moving from where they started out at. The open data, obviously this information that we're collecting for foundations is going to be interesting for a wide range of stakeholders within local communities, local government, and that's something that we need to look at and see how we can make the data available. And finally, the program assistant, which is assisting the foundations in running what they do day to day. Coaches going to schools, after school clubs, managing donors, all that kind of admin that goes on, that where we can provide a service to try and make it easier. In terms of making it easier, Rob Webber is the head of operations for Bristol Sport Foundation, and he's just going to spend a minute explaining where the foundation was prior to starting with Sports Alliance.
So back when I started with Bristol Sport Foundation back in February 2017, I joined and started to look at some of the areas where we could make some operational efficiencies. Back then we were still collecting data on paper copies, collecting cash and coins over sort of contactless payments or online bookings, and trying to really operate it all through Microsoft Excel, with no real ability to communicate to our database, let alone sort of really kind of understand our database and our clientele. We knew straight away that there were areas that we could make some efficiency savings, which meant that our coaches and our community team were out in the communities delivering more, and that naturally leads to further and greater impact for us. But it was also about operating safe and responsibly with people's data. So we very quickly knew that we wanted to engage with Sports Alliance to start looking at a digital infrastructure that allowed us to collect, analyze, and influence in real time.
So where we started with the foundation in 2017, towards the end, we had them sign up, and from there it's been a journey of just building blocks of extra elements into, to some extent, making the foundation come on board as a usual client in the steps that we do, the static integrations, then looking at apps, Dynamics, Tableau. But the difference between the foundation and a club is that to begin with, there were no nightly integrations. It was purely static data. The nightly great integrations we got in towards the beginning of 2019, and that enabled data to start flowing and more communications to start going out in 2020. What else is flowing from those nightly integrations is the donations. They were coming through Bristol Sports SeaGeek. We'll go into a bit more detail in a later slide on that. And then the more recent innovations with Typeform and some of the personalizations in surveys that we're building. Bristol Sport Foundation went through a rebranding, so we've updated a lot of the communicator content within there. And then looking forward, automation is the next big step for the foundation, looking at communicator, looking at single sign-on, looking at apps, their mobile app that they have as well. So what we have on the left is kind of our usual Sports Alliance complicated data model of all the sources that we like to pull in, what we do with them, where we push them out. We had to tweak it slightly for the foundation. So there's not just the tickets, retail, newsletters that we normally get with clubs. We're looking at various data sources from participants, from parents, teachers, schools, from the different initiatives that the foundation's running in and around Bristol, and trying to pull those in and standardise and process them in was one of the more difficult processes that we had to go through. Those static data sources, as I mentioned, were from 25, 30 Excels, again, as Rob said, that we needed to pull in from all different types of data. Obviously, we know what we're doing with customer data or participant data, but it's the transactions as we treat them that came alongside of what does the Slim to Win, the weight loss programs that they're running, how do we analyze that, how do we track it? The same with the physical literacy, which is monitoring skills and physical ability for children in the local area. The nightly integrations were a massive leap forward. So this is SeatGeek. So the standard kind of selling the soccer schools, the holiday camps through SeatGeek was nice and easy to copy them over from the club integration over to the foundation, but also the donations, as we mentioned before. So there's an option to round your basket up to the nearest £5, and then that donation can go to the foundation. So we have logic in our nightly jobs that can move that data across into the foundation's MCV. The second nightly integration was single sign-on. So piggybacking off Bristol Sports, single sign-on through SeatGeek, RSS, and the website. On the left, you've got the preferences that are collected through single sign-on, that when a supporter signs up to the foundation, their data can be moved across. The privacy policy is a Bristol Sport Foundation privacy policy as well to explain what's going on. On the right-hand side, you've got the mobile app, which is specific to the foundation. That records your participation, gives videos during lockdown of exercises and other activities that you can do. And we know that if a user comes through the app and logs in via there, we know their tenant, and we can move them across into the Bristol Sport Foundation MCV. The final integration is data capture forms from Communicator. So we've got a former players association and patrons and ambassadors here as examples, but more of a kind of a normal data integration that we would have with clubs. You can see obviously the difference that those nightly integrations made to be able to increase the data size over 1,200% from the static integrations to live. What meant we could do with that data was, within apps, we had to do some tweaks to SRM data for the classifications. So obviously with the foundation, as you can see in the locations, it's more than home, away, and neutral. We've got a whole list of schools, of parks, of various locations in and around Bristol that these courses, camps take place. Excuse me. We've also had to tweak some of the roles and some of the filters that we've, filter nodes, that we've had to build using the ticket bands, ticket classes to then split it out even further into key stages and into sports across all of the myriad of courses that the foundation put on. What that meant is that once we've got that distinguishing between all of the individual courses, we can translate that to nodes. So on the left, a similar node structure that you're all familiar with, although academic year rather than season, and then splitting it into across the various levels, the locations, the type, the term. In the future, the next development is those key stages in the sports. And on the right-hand side, you've got the donations. So splitting it up into amounts, frequency, number of donations, so that the foundation can keep these separate, keep them targeted from normal comms that they would otherwise be sending. Communicator is obviously a major part of what the foundation have been doing, and the difference, I think, is the content that the foundation are using is hugely vast and different between targeting kids and parents with the camps to targeting adults that are looking to improve quality of life, lose some weight, just get more active. So there's a lot of content, and obviously marketing on behalf of 4 different clubs, essentially, to be able to move within that space. Again, you can see through the rebranding that Rob and the team have just been through, and the data that we've been able to get on board, the integrations and the specific nodes, then we'll be able to get a lot more comms out and a lot more specific comms to targeted filters as well over the last year. Microsoft Dynamics became an important source from the beginning for the foundation, somewhere that, one, on here we can see that we're managing the relationship between, to begin with, parents, children and teachers. We need to know who is linked to who and who is joined, so who we can communicate with on behalf of people that they're responsible for, essentially. Then the courses that are actually being run by the foundation, so almost becoming a register for the coach that's running it, the children that are attending, so then we can pull that data back and make that available elsewhere within the data warehouse. And finally, the physical literacy, that skills monitoring that I mentioned earlier, of finding out what a child or a participant's data was when they first started, to then be able to benchmark and to move them through the journey with the foundation to see, have they improved. See, this is the numbers, more quantitative data. So the way we can try to make that easier to digest for the foundation is Tableau. We've got some fairly common reports that a lot of you will have seen, the data growth and the campaigns, and then a lot more bespoke reports that we've built specifically for the foundation and with help from Rob. One of those being that physical literacy test and showing one in the middle where your school benchmarks against other schools within the area, so you can plot exactly where you sit in the community, and then for more specific, where the children sit and the participants within the school themselves, and obviously gold, silver and bronze medals to not make it particularly brutal on the ones that finish near the bottom. Then Typeform. So we started off recently with trying to send out these surveys so that, one, we can keep collecting that quantitative data to get those benchmarks, but also more information around feelings and how, if a participant's out of breath or not, whether they enjoyed it or not, are they likely to continue? So there's a lot more information that we can collect via these forms that we wouldn't be able to elsewhere, and we wouldn't be able to standardize it to be able to make it useful. The forms go out with a personalized URL, so we can then link that back to the user who filled it out, so we can, again, have it linked. The next stage of what we want to do with Typeform is to be able to bring it into the data warehouse to then allow you to segment and to target based on certain responses that are coming through. So Rob's now just going to give another quick 60 seconds of where the foundation are since having worked with Sports Alliance.
3 years on, the work we've done with Sports Alliance now includes the building of a data warehouse with full segmentation of the data through the filter builder, allowing us to communicate to our supporters better and more effectively and efficiently, but also alongside the integrations that we have with Single Sign-On and SeatGeek and other platforms to allow us to increase the capabilities that we have. So launching of survey systems, live impact reports through Tableau, and really kind of getting into the nitty gritty of understanding the impact of the work that our coaches do every day. It's really taken our ability, our technical abilities to the next level. So it's fantastic, and lots of great plans in the future to really design something that is allows charities, sports charities, to be the best that they can be and deliver the most impact in the communities they work in.
So the next steps of where we want to move with the community products are being more detailed and personalised within Typeform, being able to roll out surveys for teachers to see how the Bristol Sport Foundation coaches are getting on in schools, participants, more about parents to find out how they're finding the interactions of their kids and the participants with the foundation. Automation, more emails going out based on the data we've got back from either Typeform, if someone doesn't have a good experience, contact them to find out why, and more personalization around those emails that we can automate. Single sign-on, as you saw before with the Bristol Sport Foundation app, we can start to bring back data from there and use that in targeting and segmentation. And again, personalization, delivering the next Typeform survey for someone to fill out. And the big one around relationships, we're looking at participants, children, parents and teachers at the moment, but there's so many more of the schools themselves, mentors, other members of the community that we can start to map out the web of who's connected to who. Specific steps around a bit more of a general. So we've got more foundations that we're speaking to at the moment, and part of that your account managers will be coming to you to seek introductions to your foundations. And then the more foundations we can get on board, the better we can refine the offering of exactly what foundations want and need. And finally, looking at the views integration with that's offered by the Premier League, of what can be used there.